For more perspective, let's bring in now retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, Senior Fellow at Defense Priorities, host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Great to see you, Lieutenant Colonel. So we know Iran, as we mentioned, has already launched those drone counterstrikes. What do you think happens next when it comes to both Iran and Israel?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, because you've heard the Ayatollah already specifically say, we consider this a declaration of war. You've seen the Iranian president say there will be a painful retaliation coming. They are going to take this to the United Nations Security Council, all kinds of things. Everything is going to hinge, in my view, on one of two decisions made by the Iranian side. They are either going to prioritize regime survival, or they're going to prioritize revenge. If it's regime survival, then they will take moderated steps. They will respond in ways that satisfy their domestic audience, but doesn't prompt either Israel or the United States to launch into an absolute unrestricted war, total war, because Iran probably would not survive that. The regime wouldn't survive that. But Iran does have some cards to play. They do have some capabilities that they could strike hard against Israeli targets. They have some ballistic missiles that their Iron Dome system in Israel cannot stop. We've seen that happen twice last year. The missiles can get through, and it depends on what they target. They can saturate the Israeli Iron Dome system, not with 100 drones like were fired apparently overnight, but with like waves of thousands of them. Israel just doesn't have that many interceptor missiles that it could fire that fast. So Iran can bring substantial damage to Israel if they choose to go down the path of revenge, because then they're not going to be concerned about what happens next. They're going to be concerned about how much damage they can cause in the meantime.
All right, so
we just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, so you're saying Iran can bring substantial damage if they choose. From your perspective, Lieutenant Colonel, why did Israel do this, and why now?
Well, listen, Israel has been saying that they want to do that. They tried to get the Biden administration to lead a charge against Iran. This is something that they had just had. I mean, we got to be honest, it's basically an obsession with knocking Iran out. And look, it's barely a hidden secret. Israel has nuclear weapons. They've got plenty of them. So they didn't have to do this for their security. Everybody in the region knows that Israel is the dominant military power, nuclear and conventional air power, ground power, all of that. So this was not necessary for Israeli security, even though that's everything that they're saying right now. But you've had, and I think it was Naftali Bennett has been saying since 2024 that this is our 1 in a 50-year chance to take out the head of the octopus, as they call it. They wanted to go after everything. And listen, it's one thing to not like someone, but if you have a deterrence, it's going to keep Iran from attacking Israel. Then I just don't see where this was necessary at all. And it definitely isn't useful or necessary for American national security. And I'm glad at least so far the U.S. did not participate, but we're not out of the woods yet, because Iran could say that the U.S. had foreknowledge and they helped them. They gave them ammunition and the weapon systems that were used, and they could strike against our units in the Middle East, especially some of these smaller bases in Syria and Iraq, where we are very, very vulnerable to ballistic missiles from Iran. So this is still an ongoing situation, and we're not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, you mentioned we can absolutely be vulnerable to some type of attack from Iran. The U.S. is warning Iran that we were not involved in this. We saw that statement from Secretary of State Rubio. We see what President Trump has said publicly on social media, essentially supporting Israel's move. My question for you: do you think that the U.S. ends up getting involved, maybe either preemptively or because of some type of strike from Iran?
Well, that is my big concern. And I will just categorically say that no matter what happens in terms of Israel and Iran, we should not get in. Meaning, for example, if Iran chooses this revenge priority over regime survival, and they do have this huge strike against Israel in the coming days or so, and Israel gets hit, and you see these images you have on the screen right now from Tehran, now you see them coming from Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. We should not get involved in this war. It is not our war to fight. It shouldn't have started at all, and we should not sacrifice American troops, which we surely would do if we get into a fight there. So I am categorically opposed to that, and we do not need to do it, but I worry that we may.
Yeah. What do you think, Lieutenant Colonel, Iran's actual capabilities are? And at this point, Is all hope now lost of a nuclear deal, or do you think something, could be figured out?
Listen, we got to be honest. There was a nuclear deal to be had. We could have had one. Iran said they were absolutely willing to negotiate and to come to an agreement with the United States. The one thing they said they were not willing to do was to have 0% and zero possibility of reprocessing capacity. But the Trump administration made that a red line, that that's a requirement that we have to have, which forestalled any opportunity. So Iran was willing to negotiate all kinds of things before. But now then, I'm not sure what basis of any negotiations would be now, since Israel has just severely damaged a lot of their facilities and clearly set it back no matter what. We don't have all of the details yet, but notice definitely there has been some severe damage done to their capacity. And the idea that someone is going to negotiate on a bunch of stuff, but not this one thing. Then and now, then you throw a bunch of missiles, and suddenly they're going to give in. I mean, that's not the Persian culture that we've seen, and not the attitude of the Iranian regime since 1979. So I think this makes it far less likely than before, and far more likely that this war expands and continues. And that's why we should stay out of it and do not get sucked into another Middle East war.
You mentioned our troops that are in the region. How do you think we best protect them?
Yeah, point blank, get them out. There is no question about that. You need to get them out because, and I've served on some of these bases in this region here that are like some that we have scattered, especially in Syria, some in Iraq and in Jordan, et cetera, the ones that got hit in 2024, for example, where 3 Americans were killed. They have insufficient air defense capacity. I mean, you'd have to have Patriot air defenses in all of them. We just don't have it. We simply don't have it. So you need to get them out of harm's way. They do nothing for American national security, and 100% they should be pulled out. Otherwise, they are going to remain vulnerable because if Iran chooses to attack them, there's literally nothing they can do to defend against a ballistic missile attack.
All right, this last question for you, and it may seem a bit dramatic, but I want to ask, I mean, are we potentially on the cusp of World War III?
I mean, there's so much chaos and so much antagonism and willingness to use force all over the globe. So I think that is a definite inflection point in human history to where there's too little concerns about potentially escalating into a global confrontation, too little concern about the escalation into nuclear war. I mean, certainly we got the Russia-Ukraine situation, the NATO-Russia situation. There's a lot of people who are willing to play around with that. And if you get a spark that explodes somewhere, i.e. if Iran doesn't do what they're supposed to and favors regime survival, but they take this other course, and now all of a sudden the thing just blows up in the Middle East, all kinds of things are possible. And once war starts, it takes on a life of its own that nobody can predict.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you so much.